All right, here, testing here. We're just getting set up here a little bit here. Bear with us. I'm looking to see where he has went to. Hello, everybody. I'm the Beast, Sergeant Beast Larson. We're just getting my special guest on here, and it's not. He's live at the going to be live at the college. Professor, my brother, Dr. Gerald Larson. He's coming. Give me just a second here. I'm looking for him. Where did he go? Where did he go? Today we're talking about PTSD. Hit the add button here. Where'd he go? It's coming. Screen moving. There we go.
All right.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
All right. Well, we're halfway there. And on the tablet, I sent something to you, and I realized the tablet doesn't have my phone list in it. So I just typed in your phone number and sent it, and it's coming from Slim Tablet.
Yeah, I have a message from you, but
It
for a
should be the
Rumble.
Rumble link.
Yeah, but it's not. I can't do anything with it. Let me see. Let me cut and paste it. Okay, so I've got it open. Okay. Can you see me on it now? Requested.
There it is. So after conclusion of tonight, I'll get you to save. You're coming to save the Slim Tablet number,
Is
because
that the
that'll be
432?
Yeah, it's a 423 number.
Okay, 423. Okay.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to turn the sound off on one of these.
Yeah. But I wonder if I turn the mic off on one, are we going to end up on Rumble with no audio?
Yeah. So I turned my Rumble off.
The audio, yeah. We'll go with it, and we'll
turned the
see.
audio off. So as long as one of us has it on, because I'm getting a lot of feedback. I don't know. Can you hear the feedback when I'm talking?
I feel like you're going through my ears. There's no squelching.
Yeah. So I actually have it in my earpiece.
You're in an earpiece, okay.
Yeah. But
yeah, okay. I got these set. We'll see from some notes in that. I just printed off a few of the things that you had sent, and I want to make sure I got these lined up in the right way. So when you reference document, like we're in court,
right.
For like the lawyers here, I can okay, I got these in order, and I got this.
I'm trying to fix this Rumble screen because I got a big old head on there.
You have to move it farther away from you. Like objects appear closer than they really are in the mirror.
My support, my technology is fine. It's the support of it. That's better.
Yeah, let's see here. I got
Cut off the top of my head. Get the top of my head in there so you can see all my haircut. It's getting a little long now. It's the longest.
Interestingly, and I just got this American flag put on the corner of my desk. I was out. They had a post July 4th sale at the Michaels, and I got a couple of them for $2 each. Being the veteran that I am, I needed to have a couple extra. Put my hat on here for a second. Commercial advertisement. But okay, now we've got some things going. I got the Rumble on a tablet over here. The screen is split a little bit, so I got my chat column over here. I am also on the laptop, which I'm gonna post some links. I just gotta find. There we go. I'm gonna post a link here really quick. I'm just looking at the numbers here. Got so on the YouTube live, I can see that there's 3 people on here right now. Welcome everybody. I'm scrolling up here to post a link. I'm Sergeant Beast Larson. They call me Steve. I do have a light that's there we go. There we go. We gotta make sure everybody sees my head. The Beast. This is my famous haircut. It's a mohawk, only a little bit wider. But I am the Beast. The podcast here, Painting for PTSD. I started back end of November-ish, December, because I have a very special guest I'm going to introduce here. I started this podcast. I'm 58 years old, And just real fast, Air Force veteran, retired police, worked in a prison, other things in life that's come and gone and been bad. And I finally realized 2 years ago that things were triggering me, and I had some PTSD, and the triggers were enough that I needed to address them. And luckily, I have a wife of 30 years that has really helped me and been supportive. I have great faith in God. Um, this is my brother, special guest here. Our dad is a preacher. So we grew up in the church, and to have faith. And getting to the point talking to her, I realized I needed to do something for myself, not keep it in. One of the episodes I talked about not shutting the door to the closet and just closing out what's going on. Demons. The demons, the things that are in my life, it's not traditional. I was in Iraq and in the middle of a lot of killing. It's involving violence extreme. We'll talk about that later. I decided to do something to try and help myself. After a lot of prayer, God led me to do a podcast to try and help people. That's why we're here today. So today I want to introduce a special guest. As I said, is my brother, Dr. Gerald Larson, PhD, and I do apologize. He's going to tell us CEP, CSCS comes after his name, but he goes by Chip. He's a stress physiologist and educator focused on the science of human health and performance. With 35 years experience working with athletes and tactical professionals facing personal and professional challenges to catch their second wind. And I'll pause. He's got a few more sentences after this. But this second wind, he's kind of talked about this on and off about 10 years with me. And as we get to be adults, you kind of need a second wind. Everybody knows when you have kids, you need to have date night. You need to have mama come, somebody watch the kids. And hi, Brittany. Hi, thanks for joining. And you need as a reburst, and I'm going to say a reburst to go with his second wind. And I don't mean you turn 40 and go buy a convertible, a Harley, a Corvette, and you start, just spending money on machines to get in and try and make yourself feel like you're 20 again. Because that feeling lasts maybe about 2 or 3 minutes. Would you agree with that?
It is definitely short-lived, yes.
It's short-lived. So he'll talk a little bit more about how, what he really means by this second win. It's through structured physical training, mental performance coaching, and transformative educational experiences. Dr. Larson Chip currently serves as an associate professor and program director of kinesiology at Avaya University in Kansas City, Missouri, where he teaches courses in the area of biomechanics, motor behavior, stress physiology, and human performance. We've kind of talked a little bit over my career. We've talked some in the last month a lot about doing this and preparing for this podcast for everybody. Welcome again, everybody. And taking some time to put in as a professional educator, he does send me a bunch of stuff that I just printed off. Very organized, objectively and things. And we've got 3 objectives to cover. I'm going to let him talk through that. But we come from 2 different backgrounds. His whole life, I remember when he went to college, leaving Kentucky and going to college, and he was like, I'm getting straight A's. He's playing baseball, playing football, totally involved in everything, 18, 19, and 20. He's telling me the glamorous life of college. And I'm doing this, and then I remember, he graduates. He's in postgraduate, working on masters, and I'm pretty sure you got a dual masters with the exercise stuff plus the psychology. I remember, and I was a policeman at this time, out of the military and police, and he would say, "I'm doing counseling after school. I got to go to work. I'm counseling. I'm working with these juveniles going through things." And one of the stories that he told me that's very relative to PTSD is, and I got to be careful the words. I don't want to scare gross people out or anything. But I remember you telling me that there were young females there, 12 and 13 years old, with, infections, STDs, because they were being molested by family members and it was very, I mean, all the bad sex you can think of, I'll put it that way. And it was causing bacterial infections, from, being in the wrong places in the right places. Well, it's not a right when you're raping a child, but you get what I'm saying. The intercourse
Mhm.
part and all that, and the infections, and then the trauma of that. And that's always stuck with me, that he was dealing with all of these young people being molested by their father, their brother, their cousin, their neighbor, their preacher, they're everybody, all these professionals that we're supposed to watch out for them. So I kind of in my head, and he's dealing with these, and I'm the police, and I'm going taking these calls, and I go to a rape call, and I'm thinking about what he's saying as I begin investigation and calling a detective. So he's always, been like a voice to me as an older brother, much older, 2 years. But anyhow, we bring this together where we want the life in the world. This week in the news, and I texted him today. I said, I'm got some health things. We'll talk later. Big appointment yesterday. Surgery's coming on neck, and I said, just being confused and things going on with my head, not following this Texas flooding stuff. That stress, lifetime stress, followed by the Hollywood fires, the California fires, LA fires, all that kind of stuff is a question I'm going to ask him later in this podcast. How do people deal with that? But um, we talked about, I wanted to say something, go through this very first part, looking into the mirror. And that's what the thumbnails, that's what we were talking about. And to begin, before I say anything, welcome everybody. You're back. RJ, thanks for coming back. I told you this is my brother, Professor Dr. Gerald Larson. He's Chip. Call him Chip. RJ's been on a couple podcasts. Thanks for coming back. Do you want to say anything before I say this and then I ask you that big question?
I'll say thanks, Steve, for having me, and for everybody for being here. The part that about the getting straight A's in school, that was not my main goal. Was just to pass classes and stay eligible. Because the truth is, the irony of my job now is as a college professor is that I never liked school. Um, and I always thought that you and Leanne were better students. I thought you got better grades. I just never really liked school that much. And there was a chance to play football and baseball in college, even at a an NAIA level that it kept me engaged. It kept me in school. And if I didn't have something to do in the fall, something to do in the spring, I'm not sure I would have finished that. And so when you ask about those credentials, and it's not so they're not so significant themselves, but what they represent is credentials as a clinical exercise physiologist and a certified strength and conditioning uh, specialist. And because I've always had an appreciation for the practitioner perspective of it, and it was actually the more I worked with people, the more I used these vehicles, um, the more I actually got increasingly motivated to actually go back to school and start learning. And for me, my undergrad was in psychology, and I just couldn't imagine being a psychologist with a couch and somebody comes in and sits and talks to me. And so my vehicle has always been through sports, through exercise, through physical training, where you have something that you can focus on, um, and then work with the whole person. And so that's kind of what those really represent. Um, is I'm a practitioner and then a scholar, practitioner scholar. That's how I would describe it.
Practitioner scholar. That's a good way to put it. Um, okay. I'll tell everybody here really quick. The shirt that I have on, Painting for PTSD. I just posted a link. A moderator did. From Sean Larwin. Hopefully, you'll be able to see that here. But it's a link. I do have a store. It's called Sergeant B. Um, he does have a hat that was pictured in some of the thumbnail things. But I have shirts, t-shirts, they're long sleeve, hoodies, ball caps. You can order. We get right on the link. Make sure you click the ship to. Otherwise, it doesn't get to your house unless I call you. and tell you I need RJ, all right. Unless I call you and I need some shipping money. So click that ship to button, check out that link, it's on there. Beast, that's been my name. We'll get into that why it is later. The painting for PTSD. I got a bunch of these. I'm getting them out, getting them sold. We've got 14 orders already, so making progress one at a time. RJ's eating popcorn there. That's very exciting. So I'm going to read something really fast and imagine from a thumbnail that shows me looking in the mirror. And the purpose of this is, as I told Chip, I said I want to do this. I want it to be this way, looking into the mirror, because if something bad happens, then you've got company, you got whatever. Where's the room? Where's the place that you run to? You run to the bathroom. Run to the bathroom, shut the door. Bathrooms have locks. It's easy to get into, and then people that are looking in the mirror. They do it in the movies all the time. The mirrors kind of replace a reflection in you see. So imagine looking in the mirror, and one of the first things that come to my mind when you have trouble and you look in the mirror is the words, somebody save me. Somebody save me. Remember, if you ever need help, pound 988. People always there to help. Another outlet, everybody uses this, and I told this to Chip. I'm in a lot of police and correction groups, and I've had 5 people get on in these groups and make the comment similar to, I'm in the corner with a gun and a bottle. And I get on and I message them, and I still talk to 2 guys from Canada, corrections, that have been through that. I have friends that have done that. I have a friend that had a gun in his mouth, and he called me, and I missed a call at 2 a.m. working at the prison. I had to get up at 3:30, and I was just out. He didn't come to work the next day, and then later that night, I got a hold of him, and he told me, well, yeah, the police came, took me to the hospital and kind of thing, and I'm okay. They checked me out, and he's got some serious PTSD from the war. So reach out. There's a lot of ways to reach out. Somebody save me. Jelly Roll sings that song. Jelly Roll sings a lot of good songs. I did send him a shirt and a copy of one of my books, just to thank him for his awareness, mental health awareness, and help for people, his dedication and commitment. But imagine this, looking in the mirror, somebody save me, but you can actually save yourself. Somebody else can save you. For me, it's both. I look for the knowledge, the wisdom, and the experience of 58 years to help me, but I also look for my wife, my faith to save me. Have to be open-minded. Everybody has needs. My need requires effort on my part to be open. My wife's need, who's my best friend, to listen and to guide and give advice. She told me a long time ago, probably 25 years ago, that I had signs of PTSD. I listened to everything she said. I just didn't accept it. I can choose the path in my life, my destiny. You've heard that before, but that is serious. That is important. That is true. Looking in the mirror, how did I get there? It involves this look into my eyes and my soul. It involves my life, my past struggles, my success, my failures, my career, as I've seen death, destruction, pain, and suffering, victims carrying babies out to the police car from home that are dead in a body bag. Hi, Emma. Thanks for the guy. The guy on the right is my brother, Professor and Dr. Gerald Larson. He is a stress physiologist and 35 years as an educator. So he is very, very trained in PTSD. He's going to help and talk and advise and listen. All of us. Yes, Professor. I'm getting some interesting here. I don't know if you can see the comments there, Chip, but
Mhm.
I see graduations. I see success. I have 3 children, all graduated high school, 2 that are in the medical field, in nursing. So I've been to graduations. I've seen that receiving of diplomas. I've seen, obviously the babies. I delivered my first daughter. I've seen marriage. Many of my police friends. This is funny. In the first 2 years as a policeman, I went to 19 weddings just so I could eat their cake. I mean, I was single. I had money. I'd get them a $25 gift card, go eat all the food I can eat a bunch of wedding cake, and leave. Leave before they started drinking. I've seen weddings. I don't know. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And maybe that became an addiction. And then I met my wife. We started dating and only went to one wedding after that, and that was her sister. Seeing people as victims, the loss of loved ones. I've seen a lot of fatal car wrecks. Um, I counted 1997 when my oldest daughter was born. From September to December 31st, I saw 17 fatal car wrecks. I saw 19 teenagers that had died of heroin overdose in that same 3-month period. With a brand new baby, I was distracted to not see signs and symptoms of problems. But 17 and 19, and you add those together, and that's 36 just in those two categories. That doesn't count anybody else I saw dead in those 3 months. That's a little bit too much. I saw some life saving promotions, joy, bliss, love, excitement, the death in my arms, the murder in front of me, the torturing of people. It is torture. I've seen children that have been beat, physically beat, sexually assaulted. I arrested a man, and in his interview, he looked a detective and myself in the eye like this. And he said, when I came home from work, my 2-year-old daughter said, "How was work, Daddy? Can I give you a blowjob?" And he tried to convince us and the prosecutor and the judge, obviously, that his 2-year-old understood and did that language, and that was her duty for her father. He did get he got corrected and adjusted in the county jail way before trial. He was a little bit bumped and bruised, not by me, but by other people in the jail because of his child molestation. Looking in the mirror, I see the day that brought me in the bathroom into the mirror, the day that brought me into the bathroom in the mirrors before that day, because there's been more than one day I've had to go sweating, wipe my face, clear myself, shake my head, look in the mirror, and say, "You got this. You can get through this. You need to go talk to somebody." The day that that's happened, I always went to somebody, never to the alcohol, never to the substance abuse, me, never to the guns or anything of self harm. I went to somebody. I knew it was in my head, like muscle memory, it was ingrained. Go to somebody, don't be alone. I found out that being alone as a policeman and seeing other people, when they're alone, is when bad things happen and they take their life. When they keep somebody close to them, I mean, it's okay. They go to the store and they come back in an hour. I'm talking about being alone. People see that horrible moment. In an early podcast, I drew a picture of a car, and I drew a picture of a baby doll and the driver's floorboard, the gas pedal and the brake. And I told the story. I see this in my head. I can draw this to you every day over and over again. Fatal car wreck. I'm walking around with the fireman and a 6-year-old girl looking for her mom. And I open the driver's door and I'm like, well, here's a baby doll. If I give the doll to the girl, that'll give her some comfort. So I open the door, reach down, and I go to grab the foot of the baby doll. And it wasn't the baby doll, it was her mom broken in half, wedged underneath the dashboard up into where the motor was, and her legs and arm was sticking out, and it looked like a baby doll. We couldn't tell her that her mom was dead until her aunt showed up an hour later. I didn't know. I've done death notifications more than 50. I didn't know how to tell a 6-year-old that her mom had passed. Imagine reaching down and you think it's a baby doll, but it's a human being that's deceased. I see that when I look in the mirror. I think about that when I go to bed and I wake up. I don't have nightmares and insomnia. That was the episode, but a lot of people do. My friends do. Where do you find inspiration? As I said, family, faith, my family, not just my wife. I use my grown children now to talk. I talk and open up with them and communicate, and I talk to them as adults. And my son has really helped me to realize lately some of the words and choices that I have used because of my career. And I agree, and I've stopped using some of those words. They weren't nice to certain people in the world. I'm inspired by my country. Sometimes I get frustrated, but I'm a veteran, red, white, and blue. I went to the military. I signed up for that. I'm inspired by that there is the chance and the hope that I can live that dream. A part of that dream, doing a podcast, helping people. This podcast, part of my dream, and I've done some stuff, with my brother here, but is to have him to come on and bring some professionalism as an educator on this topic, and help me and help you, help all of us. And in the same time in this, maybe in a way there's some things, I don't know all his personal of his life, something in there that'll help him to realize, we all have families we go through as we get older. I'm 58, he's a little bit older. Our parents are both alive. Mom's got dementia really bad and doesn't know us. And it's it's stressful to us, it's stressful to dad. The last little thing to say, looking in the mirror, I see a man holding his wife hostage and beaten down in Rabbit Hash. He knows what I'm talking about, by Rabbit Hash General Store. That was a very interesting night. SWAT was unavailable, and the other officer and I, both military veterans, we had to talk him down to put the gun down and let her go. And we did. Nobody was hurt. I see people on the bridge in my head. I see them as they're getting ready to jump. I see them with a gun in their mouth or in their head. I see them with a knife. I hear their stories sometimes as I'm watching in TV. It triggers me. I've done CPR 18 times and I've saved two lives, a baby and a 72-year-old man. I've lost 16 people. I see that. I see me using defibrillator and shocking people and shocking them, and going through that, and then it says no shock, continue. Paramedics show up and take over. I see that part of life still in my memories. It doesn't go away. And lastly, I see my middle daughter, who's 20, 8 years ago, writing a poem talking about hanging herself in the closet because my other daughter's male friend was grooming her and sexually assaulting her when she was 11 years old. And as a father and a policeman and working at the prison at the time, I called the warden, had a conversation. We got into counseling right away. And I told him, and I said, how, you know, I don't know what to do. I want to kill him. I want to rage on people in my life, teaching self-defense, being SWAT guy and stuff. I am definitely very physically capable of a lot of things. How do you look at your daughter in counseling, and you read this poem, and the counselor's like, this sounds like a rock song, like something would have wrote, and she didn't mean it inappropriately. She meant it like it's very, very creative, very serious writing. But a 12-year-old, my daughter, is talking about hanging herself. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what she said and that part of our life. She's doing better now, but you look in her eye and you're going to see rage and demon. I remember picking up my oldest daughter, leaving the prison and picking her up from an apartment, and from her baby daddy when her first baby was about 8, 9, 10 months old, little. And dude, they got in a thing, and they were fighting physically, and he picked up a 2x4 and tried to hit the baby with a 2x4. And I've taught my kids to fight, and she's 27 now, and she broke his nose, his glasses, broke his face, teeth. Hey, RJ, we're still here. Thank you for staying with me. And we saved her. The police were there, got her clothes and the baby, took her home. Wife took her in, get some shower. I'm cooking. It's like 1 a.m. I got the baby, and my wife comes out just bawling her eyes out, tears rolling down her face. And she She tells me that she could see the ribs from malnutrition in our daughter and the baby as she's cleaning them up. And I spent a lifetime and a career in law enforcement as a protector. And here I feel like as a father, I'm not even protecting my own child. I see those. And I can't say if I seen him on the street, what would happen. Can't say that publicly. But I asked her in front of the police. I didn't care that I was in my prison uniform. I didn't care. I didn't care if they heard me. I said, do I need to find him? Do I need to get him? And she said, I took care of it. And the police just looked at her and said, are you injured? And she said, nope. Yeah, she had a couple scratches of grapes on her face from him hitting her. Do you need to press charges? She said, nope. The law's been handled in the countryside. And that was it. That's what I see when I look in a mirror. So here's the question. I'm going to stop right here. Here's the question to Chip as my brother, as a family member and a brother. I come out of the bathroom after dinner and I come and he just heard everything that I just said as a brother. What would you think? I know I'm unloading a lot on you.
Yeah, I think when my I think it, as somebody who loves and cares about you, or anybody that has somebody they love and care about that's been through things, I think the initial sense is that you want to be there, you want to help them, you want to be supportive of them. Um, in terms of that question, we've talked about a lot of things over the years. I'm familiar with the work that you've done, and so I also know what you mean when you say that you chose this life, and if we buy into the notion that we all have something to do. We all have a purpose, and part of it is to discover what that is, and to exercise our talents, and you've done that in the service of others. And so in that way, you did a hard job. You did it the way to the best of your ability. And it's like that Vince Lombardi quote about leaving it all out on the middle of the field at the end of the game. Well, sometimes life is not a game. There's no 50-yard line. There's no 60 minutes and it's over and you get to go home and rest for the next week. But the concept is that you've given everything that you have, and you didn't take days off, and as you said, time to take care of yourself a little bit. And so part of what I would think then is, one is just an initial sense of appreciation and gratitude. One, just for you as a human being, for you as my brother, and for and for your service. Both as a law enforcement officer and a corrections officer, and in the military, and as a family member. And so that's one part of it is to want to help, to have a sense of gratitude and appreciation for who you are and what you've done. And I think that the next thought that I would have is just simply to listen and to be there, and to be non-judgmental, and to recognize, that sometimes difficult situations, demanding situations, they are what they are, and that there's nothing that I can say that's going to undo anything or unring any bells. And so in that way, I think that the maybe one of the hardest things for people to do, and I think that this is something where, from both a practitioner point of view and then an educated point of view, is what I'm comfortable doing is walking into the middle of people's shit and being there and being comfortable and being supportive, and knowing there's nothing that I can say or do that's gonna necessarily help, but I can help by being there. And I think that is kind of fundamentally, the most basic thing that we can do, to support those around us. And so what I just said is true, whether you've experienced a trauma in your life or not. It's just accepting people for who they are and how they are, and doing it without judgment, and being willing to walk right into the middle of their shit and just be there, and not try to fix everything, but you know to recognize their autonomy, and to recognize you know, their ownership of their own life. And that's a hard thing to do. That's
And
my thought.
in the military, you go through and into the police academy. In the Air Force, everything was a buddy plan. All the militaries liked a
Mhm.
buddy plan, buddy plan. And I kind of really quick when situations starting to happen, I realized the buddy plan also needs to be the same as communication one on one. One person talks and one person listens.
Mhm.
And I had a good instructor, fortunately, that explained that to me. In 1988, I don't think I told you this story. I was in the Air Force over in Turkey, and assigned, and I was checking. The perimeter was handled by the Turkish military. Turkish army had the draft, and your rank was based on your family's income and political status, basically. So I'm not checking, and it's like a little tree stand thing, but it's a little hut. You go up some stairs, and it's a little square little building, a chair, and these guys would change shifts every 2 hours. And my face was painted up camouflaged. I was just sneaking and checking around the perimeter by myself. Got up to there, and these guys didn't see behind them. The opening in the hole was to see out in the front and to see, left and the right. So I came up from behind. I'm underneath. It's just floors. I could see through the cracks. I could see the guy up there, this Turkish guy, and he's got a rifle. I'm pretty sure he's got bullets in it, but I don't know. Anyhow, the truck comes and I'm laying there, and the sergeant, and I knew the sergeant because he would come in. Their couple ranking people could come into the NCO club where we would go in to eat. We were worldwide remote, which means we probably had about 4 square blocks of base, some land, and then a fence. If you ran all the way around the fence path, which I used to run and run half marathons a lot, it was 2.8 miles. So that was our perimeter. So I'm underneath. Here comes the sergeant. He goes up the stairs. He hollers, nothing. Goes up the steps, and I can see him upstairs. I saw him pull the gun out of his holster and shoot that guy 10 feet over top of my head. The blood's dripping through the boards right down. I move so I don't get blood on me. And I watched him shoot him because he was sleeping on post. And I was 20 years old, hadn't seen anything like that in my life. High school straight to the military, Air Force, a lot of training. I'd hunted, I'd been around guns, I love guns. And I just watched him shoot somebody in the country. Nothing I can do about it. What I need to do, go report it to my captain who was in charge. And yeah, RJ, that was crazy. So where's the crazy part? Sergeant goes down, gets back in the truck. A couple guys go up there. They drag the body down. He just flumping his feet down the stairs, drag him in, throw him in the back of the Jeep, one of those like Jeep things with a flatbed. And some new guy gets up there and he's sitting, and I can almost hear his feet tapping on the floor. He was so nervous because they were all there and knew what happened. And then they drive away, and I'm like, well, now I have to get out of here without him seeing me and spooking him because he just watched one of his fellow officers get shot in the head. Well, I backtrack, and I'm like the worm back up and up the hill, and I get back up, go up and knock on the captain's door and said, look, this is what happened. I told him why I was there and what was going on. He was like, oh. He's like, well, they don't know that you were there. Nobody knows you're there but me and you. Let's keep that a secret. They handled their own thing. Somebody will be in contact with me. He was the head of our security police group there at the base, and that was wild. We had a general come in. We had a little golf course that was, it was like 4 tees and 3 holes. So depending on which direction you went, you could turn it into 9 or 18. And I told him, I said, look, here's the rule. I got a vest on, I got body armor on, I got a handgun on, which was a 38 back then, extra bullets, had an M16, extra mags. I said, because you're here, everybody has extra bullets. Yeah, we do have rounds in a chamber. We are ready, locked and loaded to go. And I said, you go golfing. I'm going to be right there with you, really close. I won't touch you. I won't get in the way of your swing. If I holler, we had a code word. If I holler this word, I'm grabbing your arm, drop, and run. And he said, why would we do that? And I said, because the mountain people, the Kurdish people in Turkey, will shoot at you probably. This has happened before. Now, I wasn't a stranger to being shot at. You know, I never got hit. It just, you could hear the bullets. You hear them banging off the metal building. So he's out there golfing about half an hour, and all of a sudden, here come the bullets. I gave the code word, grab him and run. I said, just keep running. We're going to go through these buildings down here like it's going to be like a tunnel system. I'll get you back to a safe place. And there's 2 officers that are going to meet us there that are heavily armed. And we did. We got back there. We got him tucked in. Everything's okay. Made notifications, everything. Somebody waited. They picked up stuff later. The captain, that was his like go get his coffee and carry his bags and everything. We left him. I told him, you better just follow us and keep up. And he looked at me. I'm 20 years old, and he was like, how do you know to do this? And I said, well, I came from Dyess Air Force Base, and I was on their SWAT team. I said, I'm a SWAT guy. And he was just like, come on in. You're going to have some of this food they're giving me. They got special food for me. You're eating with me tonight. So I got to sit and eat with the general. Had a great conversation. Wrote a letter of accommodation for me and thanking me. But yeah, I see that picture in my head, looking up and watching him get shot and blood dripping right by me. I mean, that's like a bad movie. You know, we watch a lot of Expendables. That's like a scene from the Expendables. I'm not expendable. I decided that early in life. I'm not expendable. I'm valuable. And I say that to say valuable. Why? So that I could be here. Because I do have a wife and children and have 4 grandkids now that depend on me. I do have family that depend on me. Right? Did I lose you?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yes.
I was waiting
I
for him
wasn't
to
sure if that
say
was a
that.
rhetorical question. Yeah.
The last note on here, and he kind of, I wrote these and sent it, and then he typed it and sent it back to me. And that's the efficient professor part of him. Me, I use notebook that's filled all the way through chicken scratches. I'm going through these podcasts. And today's is episode 25 in painting for PTSD. I think everybody here is already subscribed. I recognize names and they're always here. But as folks see this later, you know, I know people are working. This was a time that was just worked for both of us in his busy schedule. College life is very exciting, even in the summertime. He said, I'm on break this summer, but this is my schedule. And da, 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 and 10 minutes later, I'm like, well, where in the world are we going to find time in the middle of that if you're on break all summer, but you got that itinerary? But it worked out for today. So we've planned for 3 weeks for today. And here we are. But he typed the last thing I wrote on here, and this is odd. It's not odd. Nothing is odd in life. Miley Cyrus sings the song about the climb. And I've always talked about this. And when this song came out, immediately I began as I talked to coworkers that were struggling with. Imagine being 18, come out of high school, and by the end of June, you're hired into a correction. You're in a max security prison where everybody's doing life, and they're all murderers, and they want to kill the officers and everybody. You're 18, and then 3 months after graduation of high school, you're out of the academy and you see your first hanging and the inmate dies. You are not prepared for that. I did a lot of grief counseling. That's kind of why I'm here today, because I have talked with people like this myself, not with a degree, not with the education that Chip has, but with the experience of I've been there and done that. And I'm going to try and tell you how to get through the night, how to tell your spouse or whoever you go home to, how to get to sleep and how to eat and come back the next day so I can check on you. And that's kind of the walking through life part of stress and disaster. But her story talks about the climb. And if Chip and I were different people, different backgrounds, you know, he was a athlete, a college athlete, baseball, football. He does do some hiking, some walking, some rucking. He sends me pictures of things, you know, when he's rucking. Um, been into the weight stuff. I've done strongman and powerlifting competitions. A lot of self-defense fighting. 2 years ago, I was trying to get licensed to MMA fight at the age of 56, and I got RSV, and then things went downhill and spine surgery after that, et cetera, et cetera. If we both tried to go climb the mountain together, at 30 minutes, we're going to feel things differently, physically and mentally and emotionally. At an hour, at 2 hours, halfway up the mountain, we're going to be evaluating and thinking, do we turn around? Do we go back? Our thoughts will be different. Everybody has a mountain to climb, and everybody, as they climb, makes their own decision and path, even if they are next to you or behind you or in front of you. You're on the same trail, but it's not the same inside. It's not the same person. So, for me, handling stress and PTSD and trauma, it's kind of like the climb. You take your life experience and your education, your abilities, you make it. You make that climb be yourself, and it's your decision when to stop. It's your decision to reach the top. I remember in high school, they talked about people climbing Mount Everest. I don't know, 1985 when I graduated. How many people successfully climbed Mount Everest? 20, 25 people? I know it was less than 100. Now they've got about a 500,000 people that have climbed Mount Everest. That's because they made that had that willpower and decided to get there. So dealing with stress and PTSD, it's your journey to have, to speak, to open, to reach, to find outlets. And this is part of the objectives. And I'll go ahead and say those now. He wrote down 3 things as objectives for this. Describe the human stress response. And then I'm going to stop talking. He knows I'm a talker. He's going to talk about describing stress response, and also how to explain traumatic life experiences, how it can affect the brain and your behavior. And he's been watching. I've talking to me, and in my appointment with a neurology yesterday, and I said, "Do you have patients with CTE?" And he said, "No." I said, "I think." I said, "My brother has got a PhD, and he says I need to be considered for CTE." I said, "Also, my brain doctor at Mayfield Brain and Spine said the same thing." I said, "I got 2 people with PhDs saying I've had too many concussions and I need to be evaluated for that in addition to my other problems." And he just looked at me with really big eyes and he's like, "Oh, that wasn't the response I was hoping for." I was hoping, and I said, "Do you know doctors that treat that?" And he said, "No." And then he said, "Oh," and his eyes are open. And I'm wondering, why in Cincinnati, Ohio, do we not have anybody? So I'm going to have to look into that a little further. And then thirdly, and in case you forget, I'll remind you of these 3 points. The third is discuss basic practices to help regulate the nervous system and restore brain balance and function. Now, obviously, we've been on here for 52 minutes, and it would probably take us about 75 hours nonstop if we covered all the things we wanted to talk about. And I told him, time will go by really quick. I do talk a lot, but we can begin, and we can always have a part 2 and a part 3 of this looking into the mirror, which is definitely going to have to happen from all the notes and the things we want to recognize. And he's recognizing, and he's put a lot of the stuff on paper. I've said just a little bit about veterans, but there's a lot, in the law enforcement background. There's a lot in the veterans. There's also a lot of people that have physical trauma, sexual trauma. You would not imagine how many correction officers took that job because they were sexually assaulted as a child. I would have never thought that many people. I thought they would want to get away from the bad people. But for some reason, it was like a part of their, I guess it would be like a stepping stone to face what happened, work in that environment, and then take charge, and then take charge of themselves. Hey, I did this and accomplished this. Now I'm going to move on, use this job to help get me college, and move on from there in life. Does that sound like a reasonable reason to do that? I don't know. What do you think?
I think
Why
some
would a
things are
victim
complex.
why
Yeah.
would a victim want to go work in a prison?
Well, if I could speculate on a couple of different reasons, I guess what I would really say, just in response, is that it represents the complexity of trauma, and so part of and you're right. So those objectives could be like a whole course, if we wanted it to be. I would really just focus on the first one, and the reason I would take a look at the basic stress response is because from a performance point of view, that would be one of the first things that I would work with people about. And we would, we would look at certain assessments and to find out what the issues are, and not the psychological things and not the trauma issues, but what are the physical things? Because the things that happen physically affect us psychologically. Things that happen psychologically affect us physically. But the physical things are things that we can measure, and they're non-threatening, and so in that way, it lowers the threshold for healthy engagement and healthy participation in in the process. And so part of the reason I would introduce the stress response to understand it is so that we look at how the body's responding, and it helps not only to understand the response, but to understand that it's a survival response. The stress response is called a fight or flight response. There's also a fright in there, a fight or flight response because it's a survival response, and that's its job. And in the short term, the way that we respond in traumatic situations is with that fight or flight response, and that helps us survive. The problem is that when that response keeps being replayed over and over and over again, then it it causes issues. For example, it's great if in the moment for survival that your heart rate's up, stroke volume's up, that sort of thing, blood pressure's up. But it's not great if your blood pressure is up all the time. And so in looking at what that stress response is, the approach that I would use is kind of make it more practical is to compare the physiological response to the 9/11 system. And so that would be my analogy. And so the first thing that happens in that process is there's some sort of perceived stressor. Somebody notices a threat, and then the next thing that happens, we see something that's threatening, something that's disruptive to what's normal for us, and it activates part of the brain called the amygdala, and this is like the emotional threat appraisal. And here, this is now this is a quick assessment. So what do I do next? There's a threat. The amygdala is processing it, and this is just like calling, or making the decision to call the 911 operator. And so you have to decide: do I make that call, or is it not as big a deal? And you do that in real time. And so if we were to look at that's the process, then we have a point where we can start to see when somebody has been traumatized or where they're chronically under stress, where this amygdala is constantly going to the emergency response. Right? If you're under sustained stress, or you have post traumatic stress, then this amygdala is firing all the time, and you're in an emergency response, even if it may not be. So when you make the 911 call, then the call goes to the dispatcher, and in the brain, the hypothalamus is activated. This is like the dispatcher, and it coordinates the response. It triggers, and this is the shared thing is that it triggers a general response. And so that stress response is the same every time for everybody. And in that way, it's general. What makes it individual is that some people develop, uh, well, that response stays the same. Where people differ is in what they perceive to be a stress and how stressful, and do they need to call 911. If they are 911, who are you going to call? Right? If you And so in that situation, there's no way to call. You are. And then with that call, then you have a quick, immediate response. First responders who are dispatched. So that's this sympathetic nervous system, the part that says go go go. That's the part that regulates the fight or flight response. And then you call in some more help, and you get some output from the adrenal glands to get some adrenaline and some cortisol. And so that's like as the first group of responders go, and now you have backup coming, and now you've got command coming in and looking to regulate things and to coordinate additional support. And then and then you get to that process, and then the problem is dealt with, the situation's brought under control. And in the nervous system, now this is like a okay, things are now under control, the threat's been neutralized or removed, and the parasympathetic nervous system takes over, and you start the recovery. So that's a healthy, normal process. And some of the things that's intended to do is it's to mobilize energy. so that you have energy for whatever the task is at hand. You have the physical energy for the muscles to move and to work and to do that. It shuts down then things that aren't essential for survival. For example, digestion, not essential for survival. So it magnifies the things that you need to survive, and it slows down processes that you don't need to survive. And that's just the basics of the stress response. And when somebody is under chronic stress, and I just use blood pressure because that's a kind of a benign, common example. Blood pressure is great in response to an actual 911 situation. It's not great that if somebody cuts you off in traffic and your amygdala is hypersensitive now, and it says that somebody cut me off in traffic is now at a 10 out of 10 on the emergency scale. Well, it's not the same kind of emergency as if somebody's house is on fire or if somebody's being assaulted. It's not, those are not the same kind of emergencies. But the more stress we're under and the more trauma we've experienced, the more sensitive that we become. And that's part of just in terms of the nervous system, what begins to happen. And if we take a look at the the flooding and the things that are happening happened down in Texas, and we're actually my wife and I were down there visiting her brothers, and so it certainly was on we were a little north of Dallas, so not that far away. A tragic event, tragic circumstances, and and so in that process, some of the things that people are starting to question is, well, what was the emergency response? Um, there was a perceived threat at some point in there? Were the resources available for people to adequately respond to the threat? Did somebody decide that they didn't think that it was that big of a threat? And so there's still some unknown things, and this is why I would withhold judgment on that, because this is a complex system, and there's lots of moving pieces. And I think that the same is true for any kind of emergency response. We just there's too much information we don't know and probably won't know. Um, but in that scenario, the emergency response was not activated until it was too late to prevent things. And
Yeah.
now in that scenario, from both the political and a practical point of view, um, in terms of public policy, it's hard because if you activated that every time it rained hard, and you said, okay, remember what happened last time, and now we've got a stress response, and now we're using all these resources, and oh, it turns out clouds blew a little south or a little in the west or whatever. And so there's that story we all learned as a kid about the boy that cried wolf. Well, it's hard to make. These are complex decisions. It's hard to always know, and the better information you have, the better decisions you can make. um, but that's an example of when an emergency response, if it had been activated sooner, it would have. I think that's the part we could agree on. If it had been activated sooner, whether it should have been or not, that's not my judgment. Uh, it would have maybe been different if they would have had the responders there the day before, uh, and then the flooding started going. But who expects a river to ascend, and crest like that in just an hour? And so those are things that just they don't happen. They happen once every 100 years, and so I think that's part of the challenging response when we start to look at things that are traumatic, and how how we look at it from the outside, how we work with it when we're on the inside, um, is to realize that it's complex. It's complex, and in the short term, until there's more information, I would give people the benefit of the doubt that sometimes everybody can do the best that they could under the circumstances, and it could still not work out. And I think part of the process, both from a health point of view and from a systems point of view as it relates to the 911 system, is that there are processes by which we go back and take a look at what we did do and how did that work out and what we can learn from it. And um, that's not a great you know, relief to those who've lost people.
No, no. Thank you for explaining that. One of the things you sent to me, this would be a good place I can talk about the dignity framework. As trauma goes, during the trauma and post trauma to
Mhm.
people, and everybody has family and friends and coworkers that come in and they see and they say something different. And you were down in Texas, you were close, you were in that environment, and there's a lot of people. George Strait made a big donation. They're starting to talk about donations. These celebrities, these athletes. Um, One of the Bengals here donated 1.5 million, and he's also paying for all funerals. And he, I got to get this right. He did several things. The 1.5 million, the funerals. There's compensations for all the families involved, monetary to help with getting started, surviving through this. And there's something about two apartment buildings or two apartments, something to help families with the little children to find some emergency shelter. He did this all on his own. Um, I know somebody, Kansas City Chiefs, collectively, there was a $50 million donation that was announced a couple hours ago. So there's a lot of people that are coming out and doing this. I'll explain why I put this body armor vest on here in just a minute. But this is important to what I'm going to say. These 4 points of this dignity framework, even those, and I'm far away, I'm 19 hours, 20 hours away from the flooding area, you still pray, you still accept, and you still worry about people. But there are 4 points that you put on here: the acceptance of identity. You have to honor the person's trauma experience without judgment. And I've had a couple guests on here that have been military, and they said that they go out in a war, they're doing building clearing, they're involved in deadly use of force, they're shooting people. A couple of their people are getting shot and killed or shot and injured. It's a war, and they come back, and then there's this mental health professional there, that military dude. And are you okay? Is everything okay? What happened today? Did you use any force? Did you take a life? Whatever. Are you okay with that? And it was a basic routine, like check, 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 check. And it was almost a game. They're like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm this, I'm that. A couple movies show this. I want to think it was Lone Survivor, about the Navy SEALs, and they come back and they do that. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I effing did this and did that, and I greased his butt. I don't have a problem with that. I do it all the time. And then they're like, okay, you're fine. Let's go to eat, go to chow, and get up tomorrow and go do it again. There's not really there's no honor in their experience. It's a formality. So, not saying anything negative about the military, but some jobs in their HR, in the law enforcement. I did a podcast for a nonprofit group a couple of years ago, and this guy started this nonprofit, and it didn't last very long. I don't understand it, but I was on there with two guys that I know from corrections that were both high administrators, and my role was to explain the difference, what police departments do in a deadly use of force, how do they handle this counseling wise, as opposed to what the corrections do. And I said, oh, at corrections here at the prison, you get 3 phone calls to the HR person for free. And after that, then it goes through bills through insurance and you make co-payments. So if you involve something really bad or you kill an inmate, you get 3 free phone calls to help clear your head. If you're a police officer, you get 5. But as a police officer, you've got a little bit better support system. But the support system is what? As a police officer at Boone County Police Sheriff Department, there were 6 incidents where the officers shot and 3 people were killed and 3 did not die. And they went to the psychiatrist. There might have been 1 or 2 follow-ups, and that's it. As an instructor of self-defense, I went through critical incident debriefing and some training I would follow up, I would talk to them, but that was it. And they're like, hey, my buddy Mike in a hallway, guy come out with a gun and Mike shot him 3 times and he lived in the lower abdomen hip area. Basically, he got liposuction from 340 round 40 caliber bullets, and that's it. He was up walking and threatening to kill us the next day. So asking Mike, are you okay? Is your family okay? It's in the news, in the paper. You got teenagers. Yeah, they're fine. They're fine. I mean, the guy had somebody hostage for 3 days, kidnapped a woman and had raped her and beat her, everything, and guns and drugs involved. And it was just like, it's a bad deal and he deserved it. And then life went on. But did life really go on? I did run into Mike 2 years ago. So it's been over 20 years since his shooting. And I said, are you okay with, that day in the hallway? He said, oh, yeah, I didn't never lost a day of sleep. I looked into his eyes, I assessed him, and he seemed like he was telling the truth. But so that was like a confusing podcast. What's the difference in, are they getting help? No, they're not getting help. That's the ultimate answer. 3 and 5 phone calls are not getting help. You don't solve taking somebody's life in 3 to 5 phone calls. But let me finish these other 3 points really quick. Honor the person's trauma. That's the first one, acceptance. Number 2 is inclusion, and ensure their voice is heard and valued. And Chip has kind of talked about that today already. You have to listen. You have to listen what's being said. Listen, and then make them feel important. And we dealt with a lot as police officers, a lot of bipolar, and I found myself, because I was good to talk and handle, a lot of like stage 4 paranoid schizophrenics on hard medicine, the ones that were really, really bad, that, the luminofoil, that the aliens are talking to them, stuff like that. And I always would take my hat off and sit down and say, hey, I'm Steve, and try and just humanize them instead of, oh, I'm Officer so and so with my big Smokey Bear hat or my ball cap on. I just, don't be that. Don't be taller. Don't be higher than them in the room physically. Trying to look to be equally, And if you see, sometimes I lean back. I'm trying to keep my face in the same level as his, and that's my experience with dealing with people. Not that he's mental health, but in the mental health environment, I don't want to be a tall, like 7 foot tall guy talking to a 5 foot guy about his incident because he has depression and he did something wrong. So, that's hearing them. It's also seeing them. Acknowledge, recognize their courage and effort, not just the outcomes. And that is kind of important. In this podcast early, I talked about earlier episodes, finding outlets, finding things to do, being in construction, building things, tearing things down, finding outlets for physical energy and mental energy. Sometimes it might even be playing, this Royal Kingdom game on the cell phone, but you got to find something to get your mind into something. Um, and then lastly is the effect. It reinforces self-worth and psychological safety, the key for healing. Reinforce the self-worth. I always tell people, it's not your fault that you have bipolar, that you're diagnosed with bipolar. It's not your fault that you're taking lithium. It's not your fault. Circumstances in life, traumas in life, as some people grow and get older and get to late teens, and that's the onset of a lot of this. It just happens. Sometimes things are inherited. Sometimes it's what you've seen, what you've survived, what you've been through. But I always wanted to tell them that you're important, you're alive, you're here, you're valuable, you're to your fan. And I learned that really quick as a police officer. I always tell people they're important. That means a lot. It's not your fault and you're important. So that's interesting. Um, some of the things that you've sent me, I've kind of learned through life, through trial and error, through arresting people, etc. Dealing with people in their worst moments, how to be nice.
I probably not too long after I was out of college or so, and you were working in Boone County then. Or was that Florence? I think Florence Police Department, and then the Boone County Sheriff's Department. But I remember riding with you, and that was one of the things that, and we talked about different things over the years in different scenarios that have been, pretty big deals. And one of the things that seems to be a common denominator in the things that magnify are those situations where people aren't treated with dignity, where you can um, and then I just think about one specific call, for example, was I think a domestic violence thing, and it was maybe at a trailer park, and just walking into that situation, being ready to handle it, but also not being threatening, being conversational, acknowledging that life is difficult and people they're stressors and you can get stuff worked out, and so if I were thinking about that 911 response, right? So the people that well, the one that you're trying to arrest uh, could go easily, or it could go, in a more demanding way for restraint. And so I know sometimes you do all this training and you want to just hold somebody down and practice all your skills, but what I saw was is that because you had those, I think it actually liberated you to be um, more appreciative of just somebody being a human being, and in the way that you talk to them, the way that you approach them, it lowered the threshold of threat. When you see the lights flash and they pull up outside your residence, the threat's up, and then you're assessing it and you're making your evaluation, and how you treat people lowered the threshold. And so their personal emergency uh, 911 system didn't go off. They decided this is not this you know this is a something happened now. Something happened shouldn't have happened, but this is not something I'm still at in danger from, and I'm going to be better off if I slow things down. And so the way you treated them actually allowed them to go through this process and then actually begin to recover and actually slow themselves down and get themselves back on track and have a conversation and resolve things peacefully and ultimately taking responsibility for things. And I think that's an example though of how that interaction between how you work with people, how you think about it yourself for yourself, but how you work with people and your ability to handle difficult situations.
Yes, yeah, it's different. It was different. I've seen a lot of things in the domestic violence calls, and I've walked in and I've forced doors open to go in and break up fights and protect somebody, being assaulted in a bad situation. And I remember, you remember smoke. One morning we were the early cover. We come out at 6 instead of 7, and log on a computer in the car. And about 5:15, I was down in Richwood at the BP gas station getting me a free fountain drink, and they put out physical domestic, and I was right down the road. Smoke just lived there, and right down the road, and we get there, and about 6:02 in the morning, we are in a hellacious fight. Broke coffee table, knocked over the couch, and they both were fighting with us. And that was just first thing in the morning. You just don't know. You don't know walking into something.
Mhm.
This vest, and I've had, like I said before, the brain doctor at Mayfield has diagnosed me with PTSD. This neurologist yesterday said, yes, you got PTSD. In the notes he put down that I showed anxiety, agitation, a whole bunch of words were highlighted in red of my symptoms and PTSD. And he said, it's good that you're understanding and you're working with and on this. I didn't tell him about the podcast though. But this vest, I'm an influencer. Posted a link. I'm waiting for it to show up through Predator Armor. I'm an influencer. This is called the Concealable. It's a level 3A, so it'll stop 9mm 44. See how I'm bending this? It's called Soft Panel. Slides right up in here, and also up to 308 caliber rifle. Right now, they're $300. 10% discount if you sign up with your email. So that qualifies for free shipping. It's about $270 plus tax, and you can make 4 easy bi-weekly payments like I did. I had to pay for this first one, get some people buying stuff and they'll give me free product. That's how it works. But what's important with this is the week before July 4th, I wore this every day, everywhere I went. That's a definite sign that I got PTSD, that I have to walk around town with body armor under my shirt. And let me show you just how good this is. I put another shirt on here. I usually I would wear it with a tank top, and then put this on a t-shirt. I made a big video, a promotional video. I sent it to them. The guys at Predator Armor loved it. But I talked about, you go out with a t-shirt, you really don't know that I have this on. You barely in the back maybe see something. And I said, what if my wife and I want to go to dinner? And because I carry a gun everywhere I go, at least one, sometimes more. I've got permits, I'm retired police, so I have a LEOSA card and a carry conceal. But I take this off, put a polo on, and in the video I got my shorts on, and I said, you don't even see this with my polo on. I could be out, I'm casual. Look, I'm protected. I can buy the extra panels, trauma panels for the side, a different carrier that holds them. This one doesn't give me protection. You saw that. And then I said, well, what if we want to go somewhere fancier? We're going to church. I put a shirt and tie on, and over my shorts, slipped on my some dress pants. I said, I'm ready to go out, and you don't even see that I have armor on. I don't know if you get breaking news reports on your phone and you're listening, but how many times a day on Mind where people are getting body found, person shot, person stabbed. Can't stab through this, can't puncture me when I got this on. I have other panels, soft panels like this. I've got 2 sets of soft, a set of hard. Plus, I have a full vest that is puncture proof from a different company that I got years ago. But basically, I need 2 more carriers that hold the panels. I'll have 4 vests ready to go, so my family will be protected. Yeah, that's a little paranoia of the world. That's a little bit advanced preparation for things that we hope that never happens. But if I was to sit down and write down things that's happened in my life, you would understand. When I first got married, before we had kids, we went down to Lexington, Kentucky to have dinner and go shopping. At a red light, this young black guy gets out of the car. And you remember back in the 90s, that's really big when carjacking started, and especially in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, this young black guy gets out of a pickup truck, comes back with a gun, points the gun, and wife was driving. I'm in the front seat. I see him, so I'm out with my Glock. I'm ready to go. And as soon as he gets over to the window, he didn't even raise his hand. I knew he had the gun. I pointed at him and I said, "You're about to die." And I told her, I said, "Turn your head and close your eyes. I don't want her to see this, see me shoot him and have that trauma. I don't want her to get powder burns, anything in her eye." He saw that I had a gun pointing at him, and he got in the truck. They ran a red light and left. Tried to carjack us. I've been at a mall where there's been an active shooting. I've been at the UC hospital downtown Cincinnati on the 5th floor, the ICU floor, because the officer was in the ICU after being in a car wreck and almost died. And in the emergency room, the Bloods and the Crips had a shootout, and I'm up on the 5th floor. There's about 100 of police up on the 5th floor. I've been in 2 places where there's been active shooters. So if you realize all these things put together, I got a need to wear this vest because gunshots just tend to follow me, I guess is what I'm saying. But I got a link in there so you can see where this is. Follow the link and check out their products. It's great stuff. I had Chip on making some notes. Like we said, this is going to definitely be a part 1, and the things that we've covered and went over, I'm marking so we can pick up on our next podcast when we work out another date. But for instance, you've got a trauma response and PTSD interaction, and you're talking about just the bullet points are called reoccurring acute stressors, emotional traumatic situation, mental health consequence, the PTSD diagnosis. It goes on and on. I'm talking about emotional numbing, detachment, overworking, substance use, aggression, irritability. All these things are describing me right now. And we're already almost at an hour and a half. Um, and this might be, for people's attention span, this might be, a good time for us to kind of wrap up as a part 1. Would you agree?
Yes.
And then, yeah, he's doing the wiggle.
Yeah, I know. Most of my students would say about 20 minutes is plenty of time.
Yeah, except for this
Yeah, that's all.
conversation. but
Yeah.
it gives us a great place to go. It gives people a
Hmm.
chance. We'll make it like at least 2 weeks in advance, and give the world a chance to kind of get into this, get into us. They need to know who the Larson brothers are. We are going to. My goal is to supersede these two guys called these Kelsey brothers. And I know I said this last week, but I'm really disappointed that the older brother would go at a fundraiser and get up on a paint ladder and drop his britches and show his American flag Speedo at a nonprofit fundraiser. That's inappropriate. But you know what? That's entitled rich athletes that think they can do what they want. Well, you know what? The Kelsey brothers, to hell with you. And like I told Chip, if I don't care if I got 6 screws in my back, I can still whip both of their ass on the sidewalk. And that's my feelings towards them. The good thing about being, on Rumble and being on here is I can directly say things that I want, as long as I'm not threatening anybody specifically. But I'm just stating a fact. I'm intolerant and irritable about those two. We would like to be something that the world knows. The Hodgkin twins, if I get that right, they were trying to do something. I think there was a negative statement they made that's caused them a lot of public stuff. I don't really follow them. I don't know. You know who I'm talking about? Okay.
I
Just
do
two
not.
guys. And
I know the
apparently they're
Kelsey
not.
brothers because Travis Kelsey, because he's a All Pro tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. Uh,
And here's the other reason to say
yeah.
that is just to strike up a nerve in you because you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan. Being out there, living out there,
Hmm.
and going to the games. And I know I've seen pictures of you with
Hmm.
the Chiefs
Oh
attire.
yeah, Chiefs attire, yeah, in all temperatures.
But anyhow, in all seriousness, as we conclude here today, our goal is to be powerful, to be informative, to be educators about PTSD, to get people to just look in the mirror and say, yes, I do have symptoms. I have triggers. Certain screaming causes me triggers. Certain noises cause me triggers. I accept and I realize that. And I've learned to get up and leave the room. And I told Chip this last week. No, it's my friend Will. And he was diagnosed. We'll talk about him in another episode. His 3 tours in Iraq. He's the one that called me at 2 a.m. with a gun in a bad place. But I told him I finally have come to the point to say it's okay to have emotions and be human, and it's okay. And I said I've learned after compartmentalizing death, which I wrote in my book Why People Kill, looking deeper for answers, that police take a death as a crime scene as a checklist. I got to do this. Who's here? Who's there? Take pictures. Call this person, and they never process death. Well, all that's bottled up and it's been released. And I said, it's okay. And he started, I could see the tears in his eyes. And, earlier, and I was talking about my daughter, it brought tears to my eyes, and it's okay. I feel like I'm a human again, somewhat. Not all the way, but I feel somewhat. If I have the ability to show emotion and cry because my daughter was molested and she wrote a letter about hanging herself in the closet at 12 years old, I'm on the right track. I'm making progress with myself. This little guy, we'll throw this in. Animals are a great resource. This is the Chinese crested wild haired Chihuahua 1 pound dog who is mine. I'm his favorite person. He's a stress reliever. He'll come up and lay by your head, lay by your ear. He's there. He knows when things are wrong. Animals are great. But I think, this is the 25th episode. Um, Asking you now as a professional and a brother, me doing this podcast is right? Would you agree? And do you think I've made a little bit of self healing and process by doing it?
I would have to say a resounding yes to both of those. And I think that sometimes um, if you have the background and you have the readiness and the skills to do it, then uh, you know you take a need to look in the mirror and you process those things, and you try to lead by example. And so I think that all of that I think those things are interconnected. And so I would say that it absolutely is the right direction, the right thing. I think one of the biggest challenges with something like PTSD is just that the severity of it, and that there's not a quick fix, and um, there's mental health issues that go along with it sometimes. And so you could have post traumatic stress, but then you could also be depressed, and then that adds a different level of complication to it. And so that's the biggest challenge, is that it's this is what I'd say about the Kelsey brothers. They know how to get attention, and this is not necessarily a topic that's going to have that same kind of national attention, which is not its intention. That's not necessarily the focus, and that's not necessarily the audience, that everybody that is clicking, scrolling through the TikTok or whatever. And um, that's not the same audience, or the same impact. And when you have a focused task, a more focused approach, um, we won't
Yeah.
be on Sports Center anytime soon.
Yeah. And the thing about doing this podcast, and a lot of announcement out there are people sometimes, I know it's vacation time, it's summer, people get behind on their social medias, on linking, and they'll see this later and they'll come back when I do podcasts. I have people on, and then in a week or two, and the numbers are really growing when they get back and they come across it. So we they can always go back and play this, and this is intended to be there. Everything in the cloud stays in the cloud,
Mm.
so this is meant to be there. There's a couple organizations, because of my Facebook groups, a Blue Hero Project. I think they're about 3,500. They started up Washington, Oregon area, supporting police. Have you heard of Craig the Sawman Sawyer? He is a
Craig
Navy
the
SEAL
Sawman
guy.
Sawyer.
Yeah, I think I mentioned him.
Yeah, I'm not.
He's on
I don't know a whole lot
Facebook,
about him. Just
a
because
big
it's a
group.
catchy name.
I contacted him. His administrator replied back to me 2 days ago, thanking me, and she said, thank you for this podcast, for us, what we're trying to do, to help and to be here, and provide some guidance to people at home. There's a lot of help that can be done outside of a clinic. You don't have to go to clinic, worry about the insurance and co-payments. These podcasts are free to everybody. And I, that I'm trying to think, they're really big. He's involved with, I wrote it down. I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I don't remember where I wrote it. But it's a child rescue. It's Vets for Child Rescue. I think it's V number 4CR. But it's a big group, and he's advertising for this as well. So I've reached out to some people to begin process for them to get to know the Larson brothers doing painting for PTSD. By the way, it is a real name. I did paint this picture. He's seen this, for those that haven't. I come up with this name, catchy, painting for PTSD. They start with the P, but it's for me to actually put a weapon down, and I don't have any weapons, just a bulletproof vest on. But there's no weapons in my hands. Within reach of me is a bunch, including an AR-15 in this room with red dot scope and about 200 rounds. It's close, yeah. That's a part of who I am. But it's me putting this down. I do crafting, I do painting. I didn't today because I've got 3 devices going on here that I'm looking at and talking to people. But that's the reason for the podcast, to be here. And I think this is important. I wanted to make one acknowledgement one last thank you. And kind of the reason we're both here to do this, to help people. I want to thank our parents. As I said, our dad was a preacher, our mom was a teacher, and they sacrificed and did without to work in the fields to help other people, to inspire, to educate, to bring and make a life better for someone else. And it's not ironic. It's like we're programmed. The world would have seen this coming. When you have a preacher and a teacher, their kids are going to kind of follow their footsteps to help people. So I think we're guided today. So I want to thank mom and dad. They're not here in this room on this podcast, but you know what I'm saying. I want to
I do.
thank them for
Yes.
their
Yeah.
inspiration.
Yeah.
And we have always been motivated, Chip and I, to help other people.
We literally would not be here without them.
Yes.
in physically or in a spiritual context. Yeah.
Yes. So with that note, if you're all right, we'll thank everybody here. Check out the comments, folks. There's some links I put in there, and you're subscribed. We'll let you know when the next part 2 is going to come. We're going to continue, but there's a lot of different things to explain and a lot of examples to take from this. And of these points, I may only talk about 2 more bullet points over an hour's time or plus on the next episode, because it's just so easy to be informative to help people on this topic to understand. People don't realize their blood pressure goes high. They know what that is. They feel that. Their heart's racing or their heart's slow. Everybody knows that's the common sense. But the physical and emotional change a person has through stress and PTSD, I've went through anxiety. My head's been spinning. I've been real dizzy today. I created a new word. It's called parking lot high. I picked my son up from college. He's got his permit, so he's driving. And he said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Well, I feel like a parking lot high." And he said, "What's that mean?" I said, "That would be a person that picks up pills in a parking lot and takes them, whatever they are, and waits for some kind of response. I feel my head like it's going to explode, the migraine, the pressure, and that's part of my physical thing going on that we'll talk about later." But that's kind of how I felt for the last 4 or 5 days. Sleeping, eating, not eating, physically going through a whole lot and anticipating in the next 4 weeks, I hope, 3 weeks, big neck fusion surgery to relieve some of this. But to this, mentally, to think and to go through this, I have to have these notes. I know you can tell by watching me that at times it's like impaired confusion and cognitive strain. And that's what PTSD will do to you. That's what physical trauma, multiple concussions will do to you. So putting all that stuff together, I'm still going to be here. I'm going to hit the end button here, but thank you, Dr. Gerald Larson, PhD,
Hey, thank you. Thank
CEP,
you, Steve.
CSCS. And we'll find out the next episode about the CEP and the
Yeah.
CSCS. We'll
Yeah.
get into that. I love those letters. But thanks for being here. Thanks for being a brother, for listening. I remember the day I got accepted into police, and call and tell family, "Hey, I'm going to be a police officer. Hey, I got sworn in today. I am the popo today." I remember telling, "Hey, I'm
Yeah.
retiring."
Yeah.
2008, September 1. I retired. I got through the career. I'm alive. I'm healthy. I'm okay. I remember telling you that I'm okay. 2008, 17 years later, I'm talking about things and have tears on my cheek and physical stressors going on. Yeah, I was okay. I'm still okay. I'm going to be okay because I'm going to work through anything that erupts inside me. So with that, I look forward to seeing everybody else. Thanks for being here, everybody. And we'll see you on the next one, the part 2, as we continue looking in the mirror. Because we just looked in the mirror and we have acknowledged some things. There's a lot to discuss about accepting it in ourselves and what to do next. When you turn around and you step out of the bathroom door and go back to the world, to the family, to the life, that first step out of that bathroom door, what are you thinking and what is your emotional state, your mental state? And we'll pick up from there. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you then. If you hang on, Chip, for just a second,
I will.
you'll still be on with me when I hit the end button.
Okay.
I just have to coordinate 2 fingers to do 5 things. Uh-oh. I got that one off, and I forgot how to do this one. Let me see. Let me go back to this. Nope. Not that button. Nope. I just put a green screen on myself. Sorry about that, everybody. There we go. Let's get out away from that button. Let's get away from this button. Thanks, RJ, if you're still on here. Well, this is really, really interesting that I forget the wrong button as I'm doing this. There we go.